We tend to open a dialogue initially with the guardian of the space, and we ask questions of that to establish from their perspective, from spirit's perspective, what's going on. So that gives us a fair amount of information, and then we'll go through a checklist of questions to ask and evaluate and assess.
Welcome to Caritas Consciousness Project. I'm Gloria Quiddu, and Caritas is dedicated to promoting the evolution of consciousness as the key to individual growth and global healing. And we do this through online presentations and interviews with guest speakers, as well as classes and study groups. And we draw from a wide assortment of both ancient wisdom and leading-edge studies in science, consciousness, spirituality, and philosophy. And we are in our 20th year, which is exciting. Caritas started in 2003, but we didn't start recording our presentations until 2020 as a result of the pandemic. We began recording on Zoom. And our video recordings are viewable through our website, caritascenter.org. Just go to the video library page or tab, and also on our YouTube channel, which is Caritas Consciousness Project. So that was kind of a happy consequence of the pandemic that we started recording these, because it's wonderful to have that record. As a nonprofit organization, we rely on the support of our members and donors to keep our program going. So if you'd like to support what we do, please make a donation or become a member by going to our website. And there are benefits to membership, so check it out. And now let me introduce tonight's guest speaker. After 30 years in professional video, film, TV, and conference production, primarily as a producer of high-end corporate messaging, Tim Walter now works as a house healer and alternative coach. So co-author of Spirit and Earth, this book right here, a handbook for modern holistic living. Tim hosts a successful YouTube channel on which he shares his experiences of the subtle realms and champions the intuitive art of dowsing as a first step to a grasping and practical spirituality. To grasping, there's a typo there, which I'll have to grasping a practical spirituality. House healing is also a way of demonstrating this Gaia-based spiritual connection between the creative power of the non-local subtle energies and ourselves. In 2020, Tim established the KnightsRose House Healing Network, and that's KNIGHT, KnightsRose, and regularly trains people in the intuitive skill of house healing. It's not so much about rebalancing a specific place as helping someone harmonize their individual and utterly unique universe. And the website is KnightsRose, KNIGHTSROSE, KnightsRose.com for more information. And Tim, let me ask you, do you do that training online? Or is it just in person?
It's online. It's Zoom based. I work with small groups basically, and I take them through the house healing process. But it's really a very in-depth self-development process, because that's what's needed for the house healing and for that that kind of development and that interaction with the space.
Well,
But yeah,
I neglected to say welcome. I thought of that question as I was reading
yeah.
the bio. I thought, oh, is that online? And I couldn't wait to ask you. So anyway, thank you for being with us today. And I'm looking forward to our conversation. This is a subject that interests me greatly. So let's see. So would you like to start with a little background on how you got into this and what motivated you?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me, and lovely to see you, you lovely ladies there. Are you all based in America? Oh, everybody in the USA? Yeah, fantastic,
Guess
excellent,
where
good.
Tim is from?
Is what?
I said, guess where Tim is from?
Yeah, yeah. I'm over here in the UK. Yeah, absolutely. I'm currently based in an area of England called the Yorkshire Dales National Park. It is a very beautiful part of England. We're very lucky to live here, and there's a story behind how we ended up here, but I won't go into that straight away. So, yeah, as Gloria was saying in the introduction, I spent 30 years or so as a professional video maker, and I used to run conferences for companies all around the world, really. But the key thing is that in 1998, when we moved house, we were living in the southeast of England and finding things in the southeast very congested, and we were living in a little, 2 up and 2 down house. England is a very small place compared to the USA. We've got a lot of people here, and the southeast of England is particularly congested. And I was really feeling that at the time, working as a professional video producer and having to, drive out around London, visit different clients and things. And it was really getting me down. And there was a day when it took me about an hour to travel something like 5 miles. And I phoned my wife and said, look, I've had enough. I can't keep doing this. So we decided we were going to move out of the congested southeast and we moved actually over to the Welsh borders, which was at the time, in 98, it seemed like we were kind of stepping back in time. I know it seems bizarre, but the difference between the London-based area of England and the rural Welsh borders at that time was quite marked. It was quite substantial. And we moved into a house, a big old Georgian townhouse, and moving into that place, that building, was the thing that really, really changed our lives, because we met the spirit of a deceased lady that was living there. Now, I expect Gloria's got questions based on this, and we'll delve into this a bit more shortly. But that meeting with her, this as she turned out, she was a guardian of the space, and we'll talk a little bit about guardians and their roles and things as we go through today. But that really was the biggest change. And up to that point, I hadn't really had much awareness of any kind of spiritual activity. I think I was generally growing up quite a sensitive child, but there was no outlet for that, and there was certainly no understanding of that, and my spiritual experience at that time had been simply as a child being dragged off to church kicking and screaming on a Sunday, get to do the whole serving bit, choir boy type thing, and get home again. And I really, when we met this, what we first perceived as a ghost, this lady, this presence, and we'll talk about how that all happened in a sec. But when we met her and we encountered her in that house, I was just absolutely blown away by two things. One was, how had I not really ever experienced anything like this before? But B, it was the most natural thing as well. It was so natural that suddenly, well, of course of course you can talk to people that have died, of course you can. Of course this is possible. So we used dowsing to talk to her and have these communications and things. And that literally was a process that opened up and completely changed our lives. When I say our, I mean mine and my wife's. But I think I kind of picked up the ball and ran with it more perhaps than my wife. I think actually my wife has already done all of this stuff, in many lifetimes. I think she's way ahead of me, and she's just like, yeah, of course that's the way it works. So whereas I'm kind of I took the ball and ran with it, and and there's a whole stuff that I could talk about in relation to meeting a mentor and learning about earth energy and that sort of thing. And perhaps we'll explore that in a minute, Gloria. But yeah.
So what did this spirit have to say?
Well, she was, she first came to our attention because little things were happening in the house, and things like the, light bulbs flashing and televisions going on and off and all this sort of thing. And at that time, I was also starting to see like dark figures out of the corner of my eye, so peripheral vision stuff. And we had somebody come into the house to give us a quote on some works. So he was a builder, and he basically said, look, I think, you need to get your house spiritually cleared. So he introduced us to some people that then introduced us to Jane. I'm getting there in the end. So when we met Jane, the first thing that she basically said through this spirit medium that had come along to help us, we thought, identify what the problem was and maybe move a spirit on. But what Jane actually said was, I just want to be part of the family. Right. And you think, oh, okay. So you don't need to be moved, doesn't want to go anywhere. She had been trying to get our attention, and doing it ever so gently and ever so carefully, so that we didn't get freaked out. We didn't get spooked. We didn't get scared. And that's why all these little things had been happening that we'd been experiencing, and things like, I think some of you might have, had similar experiences where objects that you're using. So I would be doing a bit of, decorating in part of the house, maybe using a chisel or a hammer, and literally put it down, turn around, turn back to pick it up again, and it literally had gone. And then it would reappear in the middle of the room, on the floor the next day. So 24 hours later, it'd reappear. So that sort of thing was happening, but it was so odd that it was also, I was in the state of thinking, well, is it just my imagination all the time? But getting back to what did Jane have to say for herself? Well, the conversations that we had I basically learned to use dowsing to communicate with her. And that's what I thought dowsing was. I thought that's you use a couple of rods and you have a conversation with a dead person, and that's what dowsing is. I didn't at the time know anything about water divining. The first conversations that we were having with her were very, very practical. They were all about, who are you? What did you used to come to the house, and all this sort of stuff.
Well,
and
basically, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Basically, you asked yes and no questions. And
then to start with, it was sort of yes or no questions. Did you used to come to the house? And it was yes. But what I found straight away was that there was a degree of there was more than just the basic yes and no. So the way that I douse is that it, as I now discover, is that really picking up a rod or a pendulum for me is the act of really picking up a key to say, right, connect. So the connection to spirit is really more, there's far more than a yes and no conversation that goes on when I'm dowsing. I can't very often just do yes or no. So very quickly what happened was that I was getting the feeling for conversation, and my dowsing would change in terms of, if there was a kind of a connection to her, and we were, moving towards an area of conversation that I was losing track of, then it would become very clear with the rod, that it was. I used to say that, you know, I felt as though she was hanging on to the ends of the rod and was moving it like this, but equally there was this connection going on. But what would happen would be the rods would be like, well, yeah, kind of, yeah, I guess issue sort of there, but hang on a minute, because you're losing it. You know, you're losing the thread here. Just go back up a bit and start again. Your question, Gloria, was what did she talk about? And so a lot of the conversations were very, very mundane. But because she was there in order to manage earth energy, there were a couple of earth energy lines that were crossing. They weren't crossing, they were going along next to each other and through part of the house. But she was there to manage those lines. So that came out in conversation fairly early on. And it was conversations about, well, what are you doing? How does that work? What is earth energy about? That is fundamentally where a lot of the conversations went, because, you know, clearly it's like, well, this is amazing. This is so interesting that, you know, because again, I hadn't connected it to ley lines at this time. You know, this earth energy flows, they were described by the medium that came to help us and introduced us to Jane in the first place. They were described as dragon lines. So I started talking to her about dragon lines, and she says, well, yeah, okay, you can call them dragon lines, but, you know, it's like, yeah, you know, and I was given a book by my aunt, and the book was The Sun and the Serpent by Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst. And The Sun and the Serpent, for any of you that don't know, is the story of Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst. But Hamish Miller was a dowser and a metal worker, and they set out together to find out, to follow the earth energy lines in the south of England. I'm pausing because actually, just to try to make some clarity of this. So the story is that they followed what they then called the Michael and Mary lines across the south of England, right, from Cornwall across to Suffolk. And it goes through major sacred sites across the south of England, including Glastonbury and Avebury. But Hamish and Paul, Hamish was the one that was using dowsing to follow the lines. Paul was driving the car, and Hamish would kind of pick up with the rods and pick up the line as they were traveling. It took them 10 years to plot these two lines across the south of England. And that's the story is in The Sun and the Serpent. And even today, bearing in mind this is a book that was written in the early 80s, even today, it's a fantastic read for anybody that's interested in earth energy and dowsing and finding out about this sort of stuff, because it's a little adventure, but it's also really interesting and is quite detailed about the way that earth energy patterns can manifest in your own home. And we can talk some more about that later on. So the point was, I was given this book. I'd started having conversations with Jane. So obviously my questions to Jane were really about earth energy. It was really about, what are these lines doing? What's your role, Jane, in all of this? You know, and then of course there's a whole raft of things that opens up on the back of it, which really takes you into what's the nature of, you know, I mean, as you know, what's the nature of being? What is the nature of everything? You know, but let's not go straight down that rabbit hole just yet. But yeah, so there were all sorts of things. But the really interesting thing was that I started to connect the idea of manifesting to earth energy, to her presence. So this whole idea of, you know, the sort of stuff that we all are incredibly familiar with now. You know, I was asking questions of Jane about that stuff in 1998, and I think it was 2000 or so that when The Secret, the movie and the book were released and came out, and so I was like, without realizing it, I was tapping into this kind of zeitgeist, is that the right word? The feeling of the time, all about the nature of what this is all about. I mean, it really was quite amazing, and it has been quite amazing. Sorry, do you want to ask some questions, Gloria? Because I'm
okay. So I have a lot of questions that are popping up. So why? I don't understand her saying that she was managing, that you needed her to manage these energy lines.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Jane was so in house healing, what we now generally take as the structure of a space is that there are 3 guardian personalities involved in that space. You've got the fabric of the building itself. So the building can be spoken to. The building can be, you can have a conversation with the actual building. I mean, this one that I'm sitting in at the moment, this is 500 years old. So it's seen, this little part of it has seen some history. I don't talk to it. If I was working on this space as a house healer, then I would want to know some information from the house itself. So there's the house itself. There's the spirit of the land on which the house is built. There's a personality involved in that. We could call that the genius loci. That's the aspect of space in that land. The story that you usually get from the land, from the spirit of the land, is usually, if it's concerned about what is going on its surface, then that's what it will tell you about. It's like, I want to know what's going on up there. What are they doing? Why has this changed? There are questions like that come through from the spirit of land. That's that. We'll come back to that again in a minute, perhaps. But the most communicative and useful guardian aspect of any space is actually what I call the guardian of the space itself. So Jane was that individual personality, that being. So what I'm talking about is literally this space here, this quantum
indoor space, or
no, I'm talking about coming down through the levels into the quantum field from which everything is created. So at that level of her involvement in that process before it becomes manifest into our 3 dimensions, that's the way that I would say that these guardians are. That's what they are responsible for, in the same way as really we are guardians of the space and the physical structures in our dense 3 dimensions. So humanity should be guardians at this level. And therefore, when if we looked at some kind of balance between us and Jane, that kind of guardianship role, then really she's our equivalent, but in that less solid realm.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Sort of, yeah.
So in terms of management of a space, that it's a joint effort between them and us. Although there is always the aspect that that those beings, that the 3-dimensional form always is manifested from the quantum foam, from the spirit realm, from that, it comes out of that and is manifest into the 3 dimensions here, as far as my understanding is.
From the 2-dimensional realm to the 3-dimensional realm.
Yeah, exactly. So there's always a role of balance and harmony between the management of our energy and their energy, in terms of harmonizing a space for optimized living, basically.
I see.
So the house that we were living in, the part of the house where the 2 lines were kind of they weren't actually crossing, they were just running next to each other, very, very close. But there was a blockage there. So she was managing that, and that was a room that was very, very uh, well, the energy was absolutely awful, is the way I would describe it. I mean, even then, my mother-in-law, for example, she wouldn't even go in the room because she said, I'm not going in there. On a physical level, it really, really needed a lot of attention. It was being used as a storeroom. It had absolutely no natural light in it. So it was a dark black hole that was just having rubbish thrown in it. So energetically, it was terrible. And that's really what she was looking after, was she was managing the
Well,
I'll use the
do you think it became a storeroom and just kind of a catch-all room because of the energy, or vice versa?
It's always really difficult to say, actually, isn't it? I mean, I think the way that I tend to address this is to say that we don't really know. That both are contributing to both ways. One is magnifying the other all the time. So again, if we were looking at it in terms of a house healing exercise, I would just say to students, if we were using it as an exercise, it's, you look at the way the picture is presented. What's the picture being presented? Well, in that case, it was a storeroom. It was a dumping ground. And I mean, the neighborhood cats used to use it as their litter tray, just casually. And all of the all of the overflows from all of the toilets, the bathrooms in our house, they were all directed into that room as well, right? So not the sewage outlet, clearly, but the overflows. So that sometimes if there was a problem with a cistern, it was pouring water into that space. And you think, well, who on earth put the plumbing in like that for a start? Why would you do that? So you look at the way that the picture is presented and what is it, rather than saying X causes Y, you just look at what you've got, look at what you've shown, and just evaluate it on that basis without kind of looking for a reason.
I've always thought of the kinds of beings that oversee natural energy or natural places, nature and energy lines and things like that, as elementals, not so much like what Gary Schwartz calls formerly physical people, and so is Jane an elemental, or is she a spirit who had a lifetime? Is she between lifetimes, or what is she? Do you know?
Yeah, she's not elemental. I get what you're saying, and the elementals are really, really important. In elementals, nature spirits, other devic, I guess devic realms is the kind of appropriate label for them. Really, really important in nature and on that side of things. Jane was a guardian. What she told us was that she chose to come back and take that role. She knew what the role was and she knew what our interaction was going to be. I mean, we lived with her in that house for 15 years, more or less, most of the time. So she was incarnate as a human being.
I see.
She had worked in that house. She had she hadn't worked there. She had accompanied her mother, who used to do some of the cleaning in that house. When she was a little girl, she would come down to the house, and she did say that she rode down as well at one point. So there was this image of her riding, because it was very rural, coming down. We found where she lived. We also found where she was buried as well, in one of the local chapels, which was quite amazing. So she used to visit the house. So she lived. She was an incarnate being, but she was given the choice as to, she wanted to be involved. Now, I mean, there are.
So she is earthbound.
She has freedom of movement. She left us at one point. She left the house, and we actually had a replacement come in, which sounds a bit bizarre, but there's a whole backstory about that. So she left, and we had a male guardian energy turn up, and he was with us. I don't think it was even a year. but he was there, and we had just assumed that was it. We weren't going to see her again. We weren't going to see Jane again. But then one day they swapped back again. So she came back again. And it's like, oh, okay, that's nice. You're back. That's lovely. Fantastic. So, when we left that house, my wife and I went down to that room to say goodbye to her. It became known as Jane's room. We used it as a bit of a living room, like a snug, but it was Jane's room basically. So we went down to say goodbye, and we were both a bit, emotional and choked at saying cheerio. But we said goodbye, and she just disappeared. She was there. She was really present with us when we were saying, look, we're off now. We're going to be leaving, and she was just like, yeah, okay, bye, and she just left, and there was like no emotion, and it was just, and I just saw her in my mind's eye, just sort of, just went little, and that was it. And I was like, I just looked at Nikki, and it was like, well, she's gone. But that is often the way when we're working with spirit. You'll know this. That you don't feel that kind of emotion that you feel when you're working with another human being. There's not it. Well, I don't, and so the spirit aspect, they don't have quite the same emotional energy that we have when we feel them. Well, yeah. I don't feel it. But the interesting thing is that when we moved out of that house, we moved north. We moved to Yorkshire, and the first house that we lived in Yorkshire, I was meditating one day, and there was a familiar feeling, and I said, Jane, is that you? And she was like, yeah. And I'm like, what are you doing here? I thought you couldn't leave the house. That was the sort of impression that I had got, was that, you were there. Jane was there in the house for us and for blah, 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 and come and go. But it was like, no, but I'm here. Let's carry on chats. It's all good, sort of thing. Go on.
Oh, it sounds like maybe she had an excuse prepared.
Yeah.
I have a job here. I have to stay. I wonder, did it ever occur to you to encourage her to go, to cross over into
she had done that. She wasn't a lost soul. So she wasn't trapped in that sense. She wasn't not able to. She was bouncing around between the veil, completely.
A lot of spirits are not trapped, but they choose to stay in a house.
Oh, right. Yeah. No. Yeah. No. She's got freedom of choice. She doesn't have to at all. And in fact, now, she's become part of my healing team. Well, when I say my healing team, I mean, we are working together. So she is one of the beings that I work with.
She's more of a guide.
Yeah. I mean, but with this guardian aspect originally.
Right.
Yeah. Mm. So she's, but again, what she does. So just to be specific, because I think this will be interesting for you, is that her particular role in the house healing now is that I will quite often ask her to go to a property and to hold that space while I'm acting as the conduit for the management to work on that space. Okay, so just to put it in easy day-to-day terms. So while I'm working on the space, she's holding the space. But because of the way the house healing works, it can be, a couple of weeks while we're working on a space. And sometimes, what we don't want is for things to get worse for the client by us accessing the energy of the house that's being a troubled house. So I know that if Jane goes in, she can keep a lid on that and it won't get worse for the client. So I know that that's where she can be. And that's just a wonderful as a wonderful thing, a wonderful assistance to have. So I wouldn't classify her as a guide in the sense that I have other guides who I absolutely do classify as guides, because I am constantly learning from them all the time. So yeah, I mean,
Well,
Jane is
from what I understand from Spiritism, there are a lot of different kinds of guides.
right.
We personally
Yeah,
have work guides. So if I'm a writer, I might have guides helping me
yeah,
write. If I'm a
yeah.
healer, I have guides doing the healing work with me.
Mm,
And that's what I meant by guide. I
yeah,
didn't mean like a personal guide so much. Although she definitely wants to be
oh,
with you because
yeah,
she grew up with
yeah,
you, right?
yeah.
So, but I think maybe, I mean, this is just, I could be wrong, but I would interpret it as she wants to help you with this house healing work, and
Mm.
therefore I would classify her as that kind of guide. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the use of the
Yeah.
word. It's the interesting use of the word guide.
Yeah. You could say helper,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
we have in the disobsession work that we do, the spirit release work that we do, we have what we call guides or helpers who go to the house of
Mm.
the person who's having trouble with spirit attachments, and they check out what's going on there.
Yeah,
And then when we have our meeting, if there are obsessive spirits there, they will bring them to the meeting so we can talk to them, so we can
yeah,
dialogue and
yeah. It's very
guide
similar.
to go forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's really interesting. Yeah, it's very, very similar. Yeah, very similar. Yeah, we tend to open a dialogue initially with the guardian of the space, and we ask questions of that to establish from their perspective, from spirit's perspective, what's going on. So that gives us a fair amount of information. And then we'll go through a checklist of questions to ask and evaluate and assess. There's also the freedom, I'll work with Jane in a similar way as you described. You're working in the spiritist role, but I don't specify that as part of the protocol of house healing. So obviously, I discuss Jane and her role as I work with her, and if the students are medium inclined, if they have that very strong propensity towards being able to communicate with spirits very easily, then we'll develop that side of their work to be able to have those conversations. But I don't kind of say this is the way that we have to work it. So yeah.
Sure. So how can you tell if a house needs healing?
Usually somebody comes knocking and says, help, I need help. I mean, we get approached for all sorts of different reasons. It's not necessarily stuck spirits or, directly souls of, disincarnate people. Sometimes it is, but it can be all sorts of different things. And so when somebody comes to us and is basically saying, look, I think there's something wrong with the house, we'll have that conversation with them. We'll talk to them about what's going on a very real, very practical level, 3D level. And then we'll sit in a quiet space on our own and do the dowsing work. And the dowsing work is done to a structured framework, and it's actually a structure that a friend of mine put in place, a guy called Adrian Ingleton Weber. He's written a book. He's written a couple of books called Heal Your Home. And in those books, he's got, yes, Adrian was my co-author of Spirit and Earth. Yeah, of course. In the Heal Your Home books, he's got a framework of questions to ask of either the guardians or of the house, or just to simply ask of the universe to find information about what is it that's affecting the individual person, affecting the space, affecting the person. So it's all done with dowsing and that intuitive connection. And then when we have amassed the information so that we're drawing up the results on a floor plan, and we are writing up a report for the client, we'll sit with those things and ask the management to do the energy rebalancing. So, and that's the point where we just act as that point of contact. And just, there are various methodologies that we can use in terms of dealing with specific problems, but there's also the way of just simply allowing the management in to do what they need to do. And we are literally acting as the link.
I asked you to define the management.
Sorry, yeah, I realised as I said that, yeah. So the management is a term. The management is a term that Hamish Miller used to use. Now, I mentioned Hamish Miller some time ago in this conversation as being the author of The Sun and the Serpent. Once I'd read that book, I made contact with Hamish, and I was lucky to be able to spend 7 years, his last 7 years. I used to work with him on and off, and we became great friends. And his term for what he regarded as the upper echelons of the subtle realms, his term was the management. Now, I use the management, or the management upstairs. I tend to link the two together to help explain it to people as I'm talking it through. But I use the term really to mean virtually anything, anybody in spirit. So the management really is a catch-all term as far as I'm concerned for anybody or any personality that's in spirit. That doesn't mean to say, so in other words, elementals that you mentioned earlier on, we could say, well, elementals are part of the management. But I mean, in a way, I don't tend to think of them as that because they're so specific. But, angels, archangels, various beings and guardian energies and various
disincarnate, what I would call higher spirits.
Indeed, yeah, exactly. So,
are there any prerequisites or preparations that need to be done before a house healing session?
Well, I mean, the absolute fundamental is that we start the training by talking quite extensively about protection, psychic protection. Now, basically the simple reason why we do that is because actually for people that are starting out, it's really important. And it's really important for everybody. It's just part of the subtle energy management, as I would call it. As we learn to communicate, and you will have done this in your development work, all of you, as
in Spiritism and in my own personal experience with, similar kind of work, it's a question of alignment. It's not so much a question of asking for protection.
Yeah.
If we're aligned with the higher forces, we are protected, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So the idea when people talk about protecting, psychic protection, I feel that that's a fear-based kind of, thought. Yeah. So to me, the fundamental is that I am coming from an alignment.
Yeah.
My intentions are pure and my motivation is pure. And that's really the protection
and that's absolutely fundamental. That's absolutely right. But to start with, we talk about psychic protection, and then we get into that whole viewpoint, because a lot of people that come into the house healing, they are coming at it they're not. Yeah, I mean, they've got a lot of work to do. Let's put it that way. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I mean, crikey, I'm still working on myself all the time, all the time. And psychic protection as a concept, you're absolutely right. I completely agree with you, because as a concept, it is fear-based, because you're saying, oh, well, I got to keep all that stuff away. Well, actually, by even saying, oh, well, I got to keep all that stuff away, in a way, you're saying, well, come on, come here, I am, and it's like, well, no, this is not, this is a really muddy kind of like, discussion. But to start with, to help people raise their confidence and to understand that actually, taking them through the process where they realize and they find out for themselves that actually, your heart is your guide. Your heart is your resonating level that we're interacting with absolutely everything. And so once they start to realize that they are safe, then you start to take it, and you're then able to move forward in leaps and bounds in exactly the way that you described, where you are talking about healing simply as a process of interacting with the person that has approached you for help on the basis of, well, you're now part of my reality. This is not something that we discuss with the client, but this is the principle that I'm working on in terms of house healing, is that they become part of my reality. And therefore we will affect their reality by being at a high as possible vibration to take them with us. If that's not, that sounds a little bit kind of pompous.
No, but it doesn't at all. It doesn't at all, because everything is, vibration.
Yeah.
And I think that in order to do this kind of work, you have to make sure that your vibration is high so that you don't attract, or that, and especially when you're dealing with possibly entities that are low vibration, right? You have to make sure yours is high so that, because,
yeah. I mean, again, well, okay. So the way that I feel about it is that, we do encounter some challenging energies, and they quite often come as personalities. Now, the worst possible thing that anybody can do is to go into that situation in an arrogant way.
Right.
And there's this thing called demon bashing that some people do, and it's like, how dare you? I feel like, how dare you even think that is a way to approach these beings? These beings have a role in creation. They might be dark. They might be, very unpleasant. When we encounter them, we're encountering them because they're in the wrong place.
Exactly. I think that's the thing, is we're trying to help them as much as we're trying to help the person they're serving. So we approach them with compassion and with love and
exactly
to bring them, because they have a higher destiny. Right. And so we tell them, you have better things to do than this,
Yeah, exactly. And so it's a really interesting one, because you think, well, how can that being of that dark energy be present in my reality, in that imaginal realm, in that reality? If if my vibration is as high as possible, then what's it doing here? Because I shouldn't be able to liaise, be communicating with it. But I think it's about that aspect of, you've got infinite possibilities. And when we dive into that realm, we're in that void, that space of infinite possibilities. And there's always a fraction, there's always an atom of us that would be resonating on that frequency.
Yeah.
So,
that's the wrong question, to say, Well, how can this low vibration spirit be attracted to me? I'm so high vibration is the wrong question. It's like, what is it in me that is attracting this low vibration?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's, okay. To me, that's the same question, but okay, that's fine.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But it's just like, what am I doing? Not what is the other.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, quite. Yeah.
Because these things happen through affinity. They don't happen randomly.
Yeah. No, exactly. Absolutely not. No. And I mean, that's one of the interesting things about the work is actually, the clients that come to us. You asked originally this section. You asked about, well, how do you know that a house needs healing? Well, but the clients that come to us, that the management brings to us, they reflect us as individuals on so many different layers and different levels. It's absolutely fascinating. It really is.
Yeah. Cool. So you describe the earth energy. Let's go back to that for a little bit. As in the book, you describe it as sentient fields of force that connect us to the non-local or quantum field of infinite possibility. So when you say sentient, does that include spirit entities?
I classify, I regard earth energy as focused lines, focused flows of consciousness, whatever consciousness is. We know
information, like
exactly, and so self-awareness, and it's that part of, as far as I'm concerned, it's the part of the universe that's asking the question of itself. What is it? What is this? What are we? So the way that I see earth energy is that, and the way that I've been led to understand it, is that it is the fundamental mechanism of the creation process. So our experience of being present on Earth is through that field of infinite possibility. So it's Dr. Amit Goswami that calls it the field of infinite possibility. And I'm sure you've probably spoken with him, haven't you? You must have done. Yeah, lovely guy. I love him.
I did too. He's coming actually, I think in August or
wonderful
maybe it's next month anyway.
Okay, so Amit's views of the role of the infinite possibility, the quantum realm, and the infinite possibility emanating up into the form of physical is something that was echoed. It was echoed by Jane. This is what Jane was saying. And so when I read Amit's book, The Self-Aware Universe, it was like I couldn't believe what I was reading from quantum scientist, because Jane had hinted. It wasn't like she'd sort of laid out and said this is exactly how it works. It was this whole process of, yes, the creation process is this. And I'm losing myself in where you asked me a specific question, didn't you? Earth energy, sentient, sentient, So earth energy is this field, and it has a degree of sentience. It has a degree of awareness purely because it is consciousness in potential. It's a potential forming energy all the time. It's constantly creating. So we're constantly sending information to it all the time, consciously and subconsciously, fundamentally from our heart. So it's basically picking up on emotional energy, the way that I see it, and is creating in parallel, in a feedback loop. It picks up what we are. I'm going to stop trying to explain that. Use the term resonating. We resonate with our reality, and that's the feedback loop that we're constantly in, is that feedback loop with earth energy. So when we plot lines of earth energy in a house that is troubled, we're looking for detrimental earth energy. So earth energy that is detrimentally affecting the family within that house. Now, when you see it drawn out on the floor plan, you think, well, so you've got a line of detriment. There's a line there. That's a line. It's not really about earth energy as separate lines. Earth energy is not a separate thing. Earth energy is the field of it's the field of infinite possibility in which we are based, and we are made up of it. Right? So it's not so. When we're shown a line that is causing a problem, it's a kind of a anathema. It's not really an accurate depiction of it. It's symbolically is saying, right, well, there's this issue, but that's the way it's going to be represented. But it's not really a single line. It's not like saying that, it's not like, it's just, sorry, say again.
More of a field.
It's a field. Yeah, it's a field. It's a field. And what they're doing is showing and highlighting a particular aspect of that field, which, from our three-dimensional perspective, if somebody is, for example, as you know, if they are sleeping over a crossing point that is particularly detrimental, and that can include waterline as well, then that can adversely affect their health on a three-dimensional level. And, the fact that we're dowsing a water line is present, then there probably will be a flow of water at that point in the physical house, underneath in the ground, that is causing an energy field combining with the earth energy, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. So although I say it's symbolic, it is, based in this visual 3 dimensions.
Right. Okay. So how do you work with the people whose houses you're dowsing? I mean, in the spirit, which is of course not house healing, but it is working with spirits who might be causing disturbances. We explain to the person who's coming for help that we can release the spirits who are causing trouble, and help them to go to a better place, which temporarily anyway clears the field. But the other half of the equation is that they have to do, because they have attracted this for a reason, vibrationally, and they need to raise their vibration. So what I tell them is, do whatever uplifts you. If it's meditation, if it's prayer, if it's walking in nature, if it's listening to beautiful music, reading inspiring books, do whatever uplifts you, because that will raise your vibration. If your vibration is here, you won't attract spirits who are here. So they have equal responsibility. We can clear the field, but if they don't change what they do, then they'll just draw new ones, right? So is that similar?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. Yeah, there is always that. I think it's the case with all well-being practices. Mm-hmm. There is always the case that the client, some clients will think it's up to you to heal me. It's your job. Sort me out. It's like, come on, this is just insane. We do the process that we go in is very similar to what you just described. We do practice a method of coaching as part of the process. So we'll do the subtle energy work, and we will brief the client as to why and what can you do to stop. And it's exactly the same. A lot of this, and it might be just the way that I work with people, but a lot of this I find is that actually what's happening is the management are causing upset in the house because they want the people to pay attention and understand that the spiritual side of life is important for them. You know, it's part of the process of making the whole person. And, you know, we have, particularly in the West, been for decades and decades and decades completely removed. So many of us have been completely removed from the spiritual aspect of existence, whereas actually, you know, it's so important. I mean, it's just so important, as you well know. So a lot of the time, just like with me, with my individual experience, was that the management, you know, put us into that house in 1998 because it needed us to wake up and notice that there's a spiritual existence to life. And it made, you know, it continues to make such a difference to me that there's no way that I could not help other people by helping them, you know, right, you've got to listen to what the management want you to, you know, you've got to understand what's going on here. So I find a lot of my clients are basically on that cusp of, you know, they've opened the door and they don't really know what's going on. You know, some of them are, I mean, I've worked with one lady recently who has, you know, she did get physical effects on her from what appeared to be entities, you know, and you know these are not necessarily human type entities. Those ones, in fact, seemed to be quite unusual life forms. I couldn't describe to you exactly what they were, but it was something from the imaginal realms that was affecting her physical being. And you know, she's a classic case in point, very typical of the sort of client that I get to work with. And now she's, you know, I had an email from her just this morning saying that things are so calm and it's great, you know, and she's working on XYZ and all of this sort of stuff. And so, you know, but I you know, this is not a quick process. House healing is not a quick process. And that has been, well, I've been working with her for some months, you know.
Yeah. So it can really help people grow.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And change their perspective on themselves as a spiritual being, right?
Yeah.
And as well as on the afterlife.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I had written something here that from the book, I think it says shifts occur in the person's understanding of who they are and how they relate to all that's around them. They have aha moments. It's not our place to tell them how to live or how to be. We simply invite the management into the person's life and we enable a portal to be created for greater change. So
yeah. I think that there's you know, I'm not one for saying this is what you should do.
Right.
You know?
Well, but if you explain, I mean, I'm not either. We can't tell people what to do, but if we explain how these things work,
and exactly,
what they can do to help themselves, right? It's helpful. It's helpful for them, and for the spirits as well. So, so would you give us a couple of scenarios, a couple of examples, case histories, maybe, of work that you've done?
Yeah, well, I mean, that lady was a case in point. She actually has very, very severe autoimmune issues. She's actually one of the extremely rare cases where she's allergic to sunlight. So she's in a very interesting position in life.
There was a movie where the movie, what was it called? I can't think of it. It was with Nicole Kidman, and she has these two children who are allergic.
Right. It's not The Others, is it? No.
Yeah, The Others.
Oh, it was The Others. I haven't seen it. Right. Okay.
Oh, it's a wonderful movie. I love it. I love that movie.
Yeah. So I think, I'm hoping that I'll continue to work with her on a monthly basis, but that's on a coaching and mentoring type role. So I want to get her to be doing more direct communication with the management on her health. So I do feel in a certain situation like that that she will be able to improve her physical circumstance. You can't promise anything, and we don't promise anything, and we make it very clear that we can't promise that things will change. You have to explain that you have to work together, etc., etc. But I do think in that particular case that she could get to a stage where she could be, sun tolerant for a little while, but we'll see. Oh gosh, it's crazy that I go blank whenever anybody asks me, and I really should write some down. That's all right. Let me just think through. So a lot of the time, we do get people that are that how do I put this? Sometimes they're not affected by what they think they're being affected by. And again, it's quite an interesting one because, we have to be careful about what we would classify as mental illness. And that's a really quite a hot potato because mainstream practitioners are very quick to put a label onto somebody. What we look for really is to make sure that the person is actually experiencing reality in a way that they can deal with and that they can communicate well enough and they're grounded enough, right? So there is an aspect of a person that actually has slightly lost touch with reality and therefore can't actually communicate clearly their situation and their circumstance. And in that case, they may well be, let's say bipolar, and suffering from getting very close to what we would call a psychotic attack. And in which case, if they are getting very close to that, we will do our best with what we can, but we will also recommend that they do see a mainstream practitioner. There's nothing wrong with seeing, somebody that can help them, that is trained in psychiatric help. What you don't want is that person will then just pump them full of pills. But, that's, again, is part of the situation. So we just have to be a bit careful. But, a lot of the time, people who are a little bit close to psychosis can be assisted by this work. And I have worked with a number of people like that.
Do you have maybe access or relationship with a healing circle of some kind, like energy healing that can work at a distance that you can refer people to just to
yeah. There is the KnightsRose House Healing Network, which is a collection of house healers. And if there are circumstances where either a house healer gets stuck or there is a particular case that's problematic, then we can call on each other to help in that circumstance. Many of the individual house healers have their own networks of separate different sorts of healers that they will call on for their own individual clients. I personally don't have separate network that I would call on, and I've never had the need to in quite the way that I think you were describing. But
it's just another angle.
Yeah. I think that it is it's important that we don't silo ourselves as well-being practitioners. It's not an ego thing. It's not saying, well, I can help this person and I don't need your help. That I think that's a very dangerous situation to get in. And there are definitely places where the house healing is not appropriate, and it won't necessarily help fix using my own bad terms. But yeah, I mean, so there is always, there's always the possibility of opening up and showing and asking people to go and refer to something else.
No,
Quite.
I was thinking more in terms of, like, for instance, in Brazil, there are spiritist psychiatric hospitals.
Oh, right. Brilliant.
Yeah, and they use the Western medicine. They use the
Right.
medication. They even use ECT. They, whatever Western medicine calls for in this particular, client or patient. But then they also will incorporate this obsession work or spirit release work and healing work, and just,
But that's wonderful, isn't it? I mean, that's wonderful. I mean, I think that we're missing that over here, certainly in the UK. I mean, I don't think there's any practitioners that are,
exactly. And in the US too, it's a terrible system. And as a result, these psychiatric hospitals have a much higher level of, good results. And even, with schizophrenic patients, they're able to help them so much better than we can.
I can believe that.
So that's what I'm talking about, just the more angles you can approach it from, something better,
Yeah, definitely, 100%. And actually, quite often, that you mentioned the schizophrenic aspect there. I mean, with psychosis and to a certain extent schizophrenia, but certainly with bipolar, very often what shows up when we're doing the dowsing is that there's a section of heading called Spirits Within the Auric Field, which is really where you've got another. I mean, I know, schizophrenia is not the classic Hollywood, split personality sort of situation. But it's interesting how often the dowsing will indicate that it is another personality that is sharing the space and basically shouldn't be there, and once that's removed, then the person is getting a lot more grounded and a lot more focused. So it is interesting.
A disturbed spirit or an earthbound spirit doesn't cause it, but it will exacerbate it. Because they're feeding off the energy of the, emoting individual, because earthbound spirits don't have a lot of energy. They attach themselves to, to people in situations that get energy. But have you ever encountered poltergeist phenomena?
So if we
around and, just
things being moved, I have encountered it in working with people that say things are moving, if you see what I mean. So I haven't personally witnessed it, but I have worked with people, they have been my clients. So that's one of the aspects that we deal with.
Is there any difference in those situations if, I mean, sometimes?
Well, the guy that I worked with in that particularly comes to mind, that was experiencing that, I was literally just clearing or asking the management to clear him. So I was working on him, on his energy, rather than looking in the space for particular kind of entity that would be causing the trouble. So that individual actually is now training to be a house healer, but that's about 5 years later. But it's that was very much about clearing his energy because quite frankly, because that's what I was told to do by upstairs. So and it was obvious in just conversation.
Maybe it was spirit phenomena, but not necessarily poltergeist.
Maybe.
Because with the poltergeist, the cases that I've read about, there's usually what they call the what's the term? Can't think of it. Well, it's usually more often than not an adolescent girl.
The epicenter.
It's a whole. I've never dealt with it. I hope I never have to. But it's a very different kind of situation where things actually can be dangerous. where
Yeah, I,
until start and,
I've only ever once worked with a young lady, with the energy of a young lady. I was asked by her parents to work on her. She was very badly anorexic, so it wasn't anything to do with poltergeist activity, but she was in a really bad way. And what happened in that was fairly early on, soon after I started doing the house healing, actually. And what happened was that she did, as part of the healing process, and I mean, healing process, I put it like this, because sometimes the healing process can be quite shocking. She basically was rushed to hospital, and I'm pretty damn sure she did actually have a near-death experience. And it was so shocking for the parents that it happened to her child, to their child. She recovered, by the way. I have to say that she did recover, thank God. They were they actually called a halt to the work that we were doing together, because these energies are powerful. We call them subtle energies, but these are the energies of creation. Yeah, very often the subtle realms are not subtle; they are anything but. And when you're, I mean, I unfortunately, with that particular lady, I never got the end of the picture. I never got to be aware of how she coped on her recovery, because, as I say, it was too shocking for the parents, and it was shocking. It was shocking for me. But looking back on it now, from where I, in hindsight, I can see that was. Sometimes that is what's required. Sometimes people's lives do get completely changed, turned upside down. We just literally don't know. But I do think that in that instance, when she had an NDE, that would have completely changed her life, completely changed her outlook on the world. But as I say, fortunately, she recovered. But yeah. But we can really, and I do warn clients when I work with them that I do say that, look, we try to keep this as gentle as possible. And again, it comes back to, this is why I asked Jane to go in. It's like I was saying earlier on, keep it calm. But sometimes it can literally be like the management is picking somebody's life up and going, right, we'll sort you out, and then put you down again. It's brutal sometimes. Bless them. And you have to be there to help them through it.
Yeah. And when you say you have to be there, do you work mostly on site or remotely?
No, remote. All of our work. I keep saying our because I'm talking about the people that I train and the rest of it. But some of the people that I train do like to go on site. But all of my work is done remotely. I think the last time I went on site was, probably about 8 years ago. Somebody fairly local. But no, it's all done remotely because there's no need to actually go on site, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, would this be? There is one last topic that I don't know if you want to go into or not, but it's up to you. The storytelling.
The stories. Okay, so see how you feel about this. I mean, I'm forever trying to figure new ways of. Well, I'm not actually. I follow leads. If the management want me to try and communicate things in a certain way, then I'll follow it and see if it works. And is this the way that you want it done? And this idea of the fact that we tell ourselves stories about our lives, and we are, as a human being, we are effectively a story. We follow this classic arc of development, no matter where we are, and we're always facing the good and the evil and the challenges and all of this stuff. It's classic story structure. So as a filmmaker, a video maker, a story writer in my old job, there were when writing drama, you created the world of the person, the character, and you put the character through the story by having them face challenges and overcome those challenges, etc., etc., etc. It's classic Hollywood stuff.
Oh, also classic myth, right?
Yes, exactly. It's classic myth. Yes, because a lot of it is based on Joseph Campbell's work, and a lot of it is absolutely classic mythology and Jungian psychology as well. You know, it's all there, and so. But when we start to think about what we were talking about earlier on about earth energy and about earth energy being the infinite field of possibility, and we are a part of the infinite possibility, we are a part of that field, then this phrase, we are the story and the storyteller, becomes relevant, right? Now, when you start to explore this idea that we are both the story, our lives are the story, you know, what we tell ourselves about us. It's like the introduction, that's a story about my background, that's me, that is who I am, but it is a story as well. It's part of the reality of the situation.
We think we are.
Yeah, exactly. And our problems are the stories. If we have so when I was younger, I used to suffer from what they call selective mutism, which meant that as a youngster, as a child in school, I couldn't actually stand up and talk in front of the class because I literally was so stressed at the ideas that I just simply could not get the words out. As I got a bit older into my teens, it actually became an issue when I was going out with girls, because like my second date was always so stressful. I ended up not being able to talk half the time. Anyway, but that is a story about my life, right? Now, at the time I bought into that story, I had all of the issues, you know, and this is what we deal with when we're doing healing work, is we're working on people's stories. We're working on, you know, right, this needs fixing, quote unquote. So the point is that anybody can get so wrapped up in their story that they don't see that they can remove themselves from the story. So while we are the story and the storyteller, there is a huge amount of power in stepping out of the story and seeing it with detachment and simply seeing it as a removed object. So it's like, you know, it's like sitting in the cinema and you're watching a movie and you're actually on the screen, you're in the screen, you're in the story. But actually when you choose and when you understand that you can step out and go and sit in the auditorium and watch the story, that's a completely different situation. So that's why this whole concept of beware the storyteller. Don't get trapped in the story, be detached from it, right? So it's part of the power of learning, yeah.
Okay, I like that. Shall we open up for questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anybody have a question? All right, Rose, thank you.
Okay, so I feel like my guides have directed me to this discussion this morning. When I first saw the announcement of it, I said, oh, house healing. I don't live in a house. I live in a condo. That's not for me. I'm too busy. But when Gloria yesterday invited me, and I said I could be interested. You know, I don't know where that came from. But anyway, today I feel like I am a sponge absorbing this dialogue, really fascinated by everything that's being said. So I want to thank you. I want to really thank you. And I just have one question because I'm really just at the introductory level here. Tim, when you talk about the management, I seem to think that you kind of gesture up and you look up. And I'm wondering do I understand the management as the spirits coming through you, the guides coming through you, or is it something else?
Well, the management to me is really any spiritual being that is out there, broadly speaking. So when I talk about the management, that's really what I'm talking about. If I'm talking about my guides, and we had the long conversation about guides earlier on, then I'm aware that I've got guides so there's some here, there's some here. But I mean, equally, I used to channel because I was interested in what was mediumship, what was channeling all about, what was it like to actually have a guide, a spirit being, sit in your space and talk through you. So I did follow some teaching and training in that, and I did have my guide, or actually Merlin, archetypal figure. He used to talk through me, and so that was very much a feeling of there was a presence that would come in and be present, but quite often that would be coming in from the side, actually, to be honest. But there's still the feeling. I still feel that there's this whole energy around us all the time, and a lot of it comes down through the crown chakra, I'm sure. So yeah, I mean, Merlin is still. Sorry, say again.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I didn't.
No, you were going to say. Go on.
I was going to say. So it's not necessarily divinity that you're talking about when you say the management. I mean, could someone say, oh, well, some people will call it the Holy Spirit, other people will call it the divine, other people will call it, or is that just like one aspect that could possibly be part of it?
Yeah, it's a really very interesting question, because I don't. The Holy Spirit to me is a flow of information from the highest of the high, as far as I'm concerned, from ultimate source. And so before I work with clients or even come on to a conversation like this, I will sit in meditation and ask to be guided by the Holy Spirit as one aspect of it. But that's only a term because of, you used it, I use it because it was a term that I grew up with, and a concept of flow of information that is as pure as possible, as far as I'm concerned, from something that is, the ultimate creator. So management to me really is a catch-all term of all that is guiding us. Do you know what? I think the best way to describe it is actually the next echelon of consciousness that is far more aware of many, many different options than we are. We live in a very, very limited capacity as physical human beings. And one of the really interesting things is, I find it interesting, so I'll share it. We are, as you know, we're, fundamentally water and carbon and all the rest of it. And we talk about the quantum realms, and the fact that our physical reality is formed from the quanta as atoms form, and they're solid locked structures, right? Now, most of the cosmos, even in our dimension, is actually not fixed atomic structure. It is plasma. So we exist in this curious existence, which is really unusual for the cosmos. So we have been created to experience this density, this rigid structure, the boundaries of physical form, for a purpose. We are here in this limited, difficult to change form for a purpose. I find that absolutely fascinating, because we are conditioned to be the people that we are, partly by the stories that we follow in our lives. And we find it so difficult to change, as we know when we work with clients, they find it difficult to change and they need all of the encouragement, etc. So this whole idea of fixed permanence, which gives rise to separation.
Yes.
It's not the natural state of the cosmos.
No, not even our real natural state to begin with.
No, exactly.
Yeah, it's what comes to us from our limited five senses.
Yeah.
Limited and limiting.
Yeah.
Five senses.
And this is why we are, you know, it's fundamentally why it's so important that we do try to regain the spiritual aspect, the non-permanence, the unity of that other dimension, to bring it into this one, into the awareness of this one.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
Absolutely. And you know, I've been listening a lot to Ian McGilchrist with the left brain, the left hemisphere,
right?
the hemisphere of the brain. He wrote a book called The Master and His Emissary, and then he wrote another huge volume, 2-volume set called The Matter with Things. But he talks about how the left brain makes a wonderful servant, but not a good master. And we've made the master the servant and the servant the master.
Yeah.
The brain has the whole picture, but the left brain zeroes in. And the left brain is the part of us that tells this story about the permanence and the separation and all of that. And you know, it's clear from the information that he disseminates that this is the root cause of the problems that we have in the world. You know, from climate change to politics to murders to everything else, is this idea that we are separate, right? And
exactly. Yeah.
and
And sorry, interrupting your flow. I think, but this is, you know, that's the really exciting thing about all of this, about where the spiritual journey inevitably takes you to that point of understanding that you're not what you think. You know, we are not what we think we are. Right? Yeah. We are not, as human beings, we are far more powerful and far more capable of changing the seeming permanence of this dimension. That's one thing. And it is only stuck in its permanence because we think it is. Right. So the power of thought, the power of manifesting, and do talk to Amit Goswami about this, because he'll love, you know, this is absolutely up his street, because it really is important that we understand our real true form, which is to be a part of the field of infinite possibility, which is part of the divine, right? In whatever label you want to give it, the divine, the source of creation and the creative force, we are a part of it, and we have forgotten that. And now, so if we look at climate, there's the term climate emergency, and I know that there's all sorts of things happening in our external world, and the natural world is crying out for us to reconnect at the level that we should be connecting, which is to be in balance and harmony with it, right? And to consider it as part of us, because we are a part of it and it is a part of us. And that's what comes when you understand your divine nature, when you completely shift your perspective on who you are, is that you understand that you are actually a part of everything, because you are a part of God. So that's where it all takes you to. And that, to me, is absolutely amazing. And I still am amazed by it, because it's really it's really just a revelation that really in the last year or so has started to really hit home, you know, the implications of it.
Completely life transforming.
Yeah.
Completely life transforming when we have that direct experience of that reality of who we are. It changes everything, you know. I mean, our lives outwardly may not seem any different.
Yeah.
Inwardly, it's a huge shift. And even though we can't stay in the experience for more than, I don't know, a few minutes, a few hours, it still becomes a context we never, it changes everything. Just one glimpse changes everything.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I cannot sit here and say that I, regularly get into that state. I think I might have experienced it once, but people talk about, they ask the question, they say, well, earth energy, that's very interesting, Tim. And you talk about, the spiral of earth energy in your room and in the house and all of that. But, what's the point? Why? What's in it for me is the big question, and actually what's in it for every single individual is that if you sit with that earth energy and you are aware of it and you sit on the main positive power center in the house, for example, then what you're doing is you're basically putting yourself in the best possible three-dimensional position to be accessing the wisdom and the connection to the management and all of that. You're connecting at a very deep level as you meditate with the knowledge of that energy and the accompaniment of that energy. It is working with your soul to enable an aspect of experience. And that's what's in it for people. That's why it's so important.
That's why people go meditate in crop circles, for instance, right? Because they are always placed in powerful places. And, maybe the circle itself has certain energy that can feed us. But then conversely, if we have, let's say, a room in our house or, someplace where we meditate on a regular basis, that will also, I had after our center closed, with we had a center in Boulder, Colorado, and we were guided to not renew our lease at a certain point. And so we didn't. And then less than a year later, the pandemic hit, and we would have really stuck, if we had renewed the lease. But in that center, we had a healing room where we did all of our healing.
That's it.
And that room, you could walk in and feel energy, it was
exactly.
Powerful. So
exactly.
It's isolating a space in your home and I know you mentioned this in your book as well. That you can raise the energy. It will collect,
That's right. Yeah. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about originally about, which comes first? Well, it doesn't really matter because every room has got a power center. And if you start meditating, I know Ginny's got a question and we'll come to Ginny in a second, but if you start meditating in a particular room, then that power center in that room will amplify. It will literally move across the room. If you're sitting in the opposite corner to it, it'll come to you, and it will be, it's there for you, and it is part of you. Ginny, what was your question?
Well, actually, that ties in pretty well with it because I've never used a dowsing rod, and although I try to meditate, I'm too scattered, I think, to make it work. So I'm kind of curious about using the dowsing rod to maybe find power centers. Like I have a couple of favorite places to hang out. But maybe if I even sat in my regular place with a dowsing rod like you had there, would that kind of help show me when I'm on focus?
I wouldn't recommend sitting and trying to meditate and trying to douse at the same time, just because you're kind of not doing, you're doing, both.
Multitasking.
But, exactly. So, but what, the YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, which is, if you haven't got it already, it's youtube.com/@KnightsRose, KnightsRose. So there's a playlist of Learn to Douse on there. So you can learn to use a rod anyway, very easily. It's very simple. And you could just ask to be shown the most positive power center in the room that you like to meditate in already. And the chances are that actually, well, you said you don't meditate much, but actually, you probably are. It's probably sorry, my chair's slipping down. You probably are meditating well enough and getting enough of a connection that the power center probably is where you meditate or try to meditate the most already. Okay. But if you learn to dowse and just double check, then that'll give you the verification that it's there. But even if it isn't, don't worry about it, because it will move to you. But I really do recommend, if you can, do whatever you can do to try to focus your mind so that you can meditate more, because you probably get sick of people telling you this, because meditation is the foundation stone of all practice. So the more you can meditate, then the better everything else will build from it. Okay, so there's a lovely guy, lovely writer, actually. His name is Dean Sluyter, Sluyter. He does free meditation classes on YouTube. He's a lovely guy. I've had him on my channel a couple of times. And he is brilliant at really helping people see how simple it is to really meditate, and to take you through the process of just, look, you can do this, and this is okay. Right? So I'd recommend you dig him out as well, because he really will help.
Okay, thank you. Well, I guess I'm curious about your book, because I want to know more of what's in the
well, yeah, Spirit and Earth, the book Spirit and Earth is really it was written to try to illustrate how simple it is to actually connect to the management, to your spiritual self. So it's built around workshops that Adrian and I used to run before the pandemic, to really, take people through this processes, and a lot of the time, there are all sorts of different modalities that you can follow, and all sorts of different spiritual teachings that you can follow, and all of this stuff, and that's great, and it's lovely. And some people really relish an individual, like some people really relish being a druid or whatever it is, and that's fine. But what we wanted to do was to say, look, it's actually just very simple. You don't need to be a druid. You don't need to spend 10 years in a monastery to do the work and to get really good results. Because a lot of this is very, very much about the same sort of stuff that Joe Dispenza talks about. I'm assuming that we all dip into Joe Dispenza's work. So it's about the basic power of focused intent. And that's all we're doing, is saying, right, connect to the heart. This is how you do it, simply follow it through. And so the book is really about a touch of our sort of thinking about philosophies and about the way that things are, but just really focusing in and showing people how easy it is just to take the time out and connect to the spiritual energies that are around all of us. So we talk about elementals, we talk about angels, but you don't have to be massively sensitive to really actually start to perceive and to benefit from the interaction with these other energy beings or energy sources. I'm not incredibly sensitive at all. I really not. Some of the students that I work with, they're incredible, so sensitive. But again, equally, as you would have gathered over the last hour or so, it's really, really important that sensitivity is balanced with a really grounded nature. So you've got to be really grounded in order to make the work, get the balance right. There's no good being incredibly sensitive and just all over the place.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's the problem with a lot of the New Age movement, is that it lacks the grounding and the foundation of just doing our inner work, getting rid of negative patterns, identifying negative patterns, getting rid of negative patterns. It's a question of maturity. I often say we live in a society that has developed a very high level of technology, but we haven't developed the maturity, the emotional maturity, moral maturity, spiritual maturity, psychological maturity, to be able to use them dependably And, so sometimes we use them self-destructively, we use destructively and destructively. And it's no different with our inner technology.
No, that's true.
Foundation, we need the maturity. That's why we need to do our work, our spiritual work, our inner work, so that when we start to access these higher realms, we have that foundation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the spiritual, you all know what I mean, but it just, again, sounds so pompous and blah. It's the spiritual path is not an easy one. Because it is about doing the shadow work. It's about understanding yourself. There is nothing more important than understanding who you are in order to be able to assimilate the information that's coming to you. Partly because you've got to differentiate between your stuff and other stuff so that you can see what is other people's stuff. But also because if you've got the grounding and understanding of who you are as a person, as a human being, I mean, not as a spiritual being, I mean, literally as Tim Walter, he needs to understand who he is and, understand that actually being such a highly developed introvert is part of who I am, So, it's important. A lot of spiritual work seems to kind of deny the aspect of the human, whereas actually the human being is really fundamentally important, because it's the human being that is making the choices about what is it doing with the spiritual energy. The human being is fundamental to this. It's not about excluding the human being. Yep. So we are all, the human foibles are a part of the picture, and that's what we have to work with.
Yeah. Very important. I agree. I totally agree. So any other questions? There you go.
I've gotten so much from this. I just can't begin to tell you how much I've enjoyed all this. I have a true affinity to land. And I've tried to learn dowsing. I've used rods and I've used a pendulum. And on the property that I have, I live on our farm is on the river. I have a stream that's right next to the house. And then on a further property, I have gone there and oftentimes found energies that I know are there. And I feel as if my whole demeanor changes in a way that is meant to elevate my consciousness. But I don't know what is the message. What am I supposed to be doing here? I would like to say years ago, I was at a holistic fair in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I sat with a medium who knew nothing about my life whatsoever, but somehow knew that this property that we had purchased the very same year had 3 vortices on it. And I have no idea what that meant, but I do know that when I am on that property, there are certain places that I feel as if I've entered a different dimension. I don't know what it is. I actually had the feeling that I was not even able to describe where I was on the property, as if I had lost an attachment that would have identified the spot that I was standing on, even though I know the property very well. So I wonder if you've ever encountered anything like that. I know you've talked about the ley lines. What is the meaning of that? How is it communicating to me in a way that I could use for the good, for something good?
Yeah, well, that feeling of being kind of taken out of day-to-day context and taken out of your own time zone almost is quite common at sacred sites. That's one thing I would say. So over here in the UK, we've got quite a lot of Neolithic standing stones. So they would have been put up around about 2000 BC, something like that. So they're sacred sites. And when you step into that space, that has, been used for various, various intentional purposes over the eons. Over the centuries. It is very much about, being separated from everything else outside of the circle. Now, you're obviously sensitive enough to be able to pick up on that, and the point is really always about what is it telling you, what is it giving you, what are you feeling, right? So again, you do need to, ideally, what I would suggest is that at any of those spots that you've got on your land, if you can find them again, and dowsing is the best way to find them again. So really do check out the YouTube channel and really just learn how to use dowsing rods. You've used them before, so use them again, get taken to that space, meditate in that space as long as the weather's lovely, and just really ask upstairs, ask your guides, ask your presence, what is this, what does this mean, how can I best work with this land, your land, for the betterment of all beings, if you like. So you're positioning the question in a fairly broad sense, and again, this is not a dowsing question, this is a connection question. This is you asking of the management for information that you can take and do something with, bearing in mind that most of spiritual connection really is about being, not doing, right? But because the human being likes to do things, and our spiritual path is always going to involve a mixture of doing and being, then you're asking, what can I do in this space for the betterment of all beings, right? So just ask that question. But what I would say is just connect into it with dowsing if you can to start with. Sorry, Gloria, go on. You wanted to ask something.
I wanted to ask you, when you talk about dowsing and asking questions, do you ever use charts, dowsing charts that have, specific questions?
Personally, I don't. I've never used a dowsing chart in my life. But I do understand that some people do, and some people really like them, and some people really get on with them, and that's fine. I've got nothing against that at all.
Like, I don't either, but I don't really do dowsing, but it's like with kinesiology, which I also don't practice, but muscle
muscle testing.
Muscle testing. Often you have a chart and you say, okay, you ask a question that's on the chart, like, is this a physical problem? Is this a spiritual problem? Is this an emotional problem? And the muscle goes weak if it's no, and strong if it's yes, or whatever. And so you get yes, no answers. And I've seen people use charts, use dowsing, like with a pendulum, so the pendulum will, I don't know, point to a certain answer, something like that. That's just something that I've heard about, and I've seen it, but I have never really used it.
Yes, I mean, you can get various different charts for various different things. Quite a lot of people use dowsing charts just to give a numeric readout, a response. So it might go from 0 in the middle to a -10 or a +10. And if you're asking about, is this space positive for me, or is it, let's rephrase the question. Is this space good, beneficial to me? You get a yes. Well, in that case, could you please indicate how beneficial is it? And then therefore you'd expect the rod to move to a plus whatever it be. Obviously, if the answer was no, it's not, then it would move to a negative number of, whatever it be. But the thing is that you can ask those questions without the chart. You just simply ask, well, can you tell me on a scale of 0 to -10, how detrimental are these people experiencing the activity in their house, and then you'll go, well, because so is it -10? No, okay. So show me when it's an appropriate number, -10, -9, -8, -7, and it'll move on to whatever it is. So you can just talk it through. That's why I've never felt the need for a chart. But charts are fine if you want to use them. It's just, again, it go with whatever feels the most natural.
I think it takes a certain amount of practice to start to trust your intuitive sense of answers, you know?
It does. Yes, it does.
A tendency at first to think, oh, this is my imagination. I can't
Yeah.
all this.
100%.
So
Yeah.
That's what happens to me.
like that, you know, even putting like 1 to 10 on a piece of paper and, you know, saying, okay, show me, you know, I don't know, but it helps sometimes to
yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. And anybody that's starting out at any stage, especially with dowsing, something that's as simple as dowsing, everybody always faces the same issues. And again, if you look at the playlist of the videos on my channel, I think there's about 6 in the series. But in the first one, I do talk about the fact that, you know, you've got to build up your own confidence. You've got to build up your own trust. And the way to do that is to practice. And you do really have to practice. And what you'll find is that you'll start to get the responses and they'll start to get stronger and you'll start to get more accurate in your dowsing. You won't be accurate to start with, but you will improve. And then what'll happen is just when you think, oh, this is great, I'm getting the hang of this, is your dowsing will all fall apart. It'll go wrong. And the reason is because actually the management is going, right, okay, you got the hang of that. Right. Let's move on to the next lesson. You know, they are literally taking you in the stage, but so they'll say, no, right, forget all that now. Just go with this, right? And you've got to be open enough to be able to see that actually, oh, this is where they want to take me. Because you've got to bear in mind that you as an individual point of reality is sharing the space with everything else in your 3 dimensions. And the management are using everything else in your 3 dimensions as signposts, as symbols, as markers, as indicators for you to follow the path, follow what's going on. You know, we interact with our physical environment, even though we're spiritual beings, and we spend a lot of time in searching for our spirituality, and that's great, and it is definitely worth doing, 100%. But let's not forget that actually, day to day, moment by moment, we've got all of this 3D stuff that they play with and manipulate for us to give us the signs and show us the way, if we're open to seeing the signs and being shown the way, right? It's great, because life will reflect it.
Yes. Well, on that note, I think we're just about out of time. We may have time for one very quick question, if anyone has it. But we've got 2 minutes.
Oh.
2 minutes.
Okay.
Go on, Jenny.
I was just going to ask quickly, is there a difference between water line energy and earth energy lines?
Yeah.
Is there a distinction?
Yeah, you can feel the difference. The more, as you get more experienced with tuning into one, you will feel the difference between the 2. Okay. I can't describe to you the way that I feel the slight difference, you know, because it gets into banal statements like, well, one feels wetter. Well, I mean, how do I describe, you know, I don't know, you know, I can't describe it any other way because it's a really internal process. But you can feel the difference. There's a kind of stickiness about some of them that you don't get in some of the other ones. And it's just the more mindful you can be about the way that you process information that comes to you, the better, because you'll narrow down and you'll start to differentiate. But it's only practice.
I understand.
I would also maybe suggest that you think about what is it that you want to know exactly, specifically about these places, right? What is your curiosity? What draws you to them? What would you know, like, do you envision using them for some purpose? And is that, you know, is that what you want to know about? That kind of thing. Think about what it is that you're wanting, what answers or what questions are you asking about it? And right, Tim?
They'll get
so definitely.
Tired of me, Gloria. They'll get tired of me. They'll say, "Go away."
No, they won't. No, they won't.
They won't.
No.
I think nature wants to be seen. I think nature wants us to pay attention to it. You know,
definitely, 100%.
Yeah, but we just have to be clear on, you know, what our expectations are, or what, you know, why are we inquiring
Yeah, and if I may, I think as human beings, we are often conditioned to undervalue ourselves. So we are conditioned to be too humble, too modest, too whatever, and that's on the assumption that you've actually got any kind of self-worth in the first place. So often with dowsing and connecting to spirit and all of these subtle realms, it is recognizing that actually there is zero judgment from them. You have a worth, and all those beings are wanting us to actually step in, accept our worth, and therefore our role in the whole balance of everything, because every one of us has that worth and has that balance. We really do.
It's very uplifting. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Totally.
100%.
Yeah.
I
So,
want to just say thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate this.
oh, good.
Thank you, Rose.
Very cool. I'm going to get the book.
Great.
Yeah, me too.
Good, cool. Well, drop it into the YouTube channel as well and say hello. Leave a comment and say hello, and so that I know who you are.
YouTube again. The YouTube.
It's youtube.com/@KnightsRose. That's all you need to search for, or search for Tim Walter House Healer, Tim Walter Dowser. One of those. Just put my name, WALTER, and Dowser or House Healer, and it'll find me. If you don't put that, you'll come up with a German football coach, and I don't think he won't be able to help you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Tim. I hope we can meet again this way at some future point. And it's
Thank
been
you,
a pleasure,
Gloria.
a real pleasure to
good
talk
fun.
to you, and thank you, and everybody who attended. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you for being so hospitable. It's been great. Thank you.